Coleridge by Jim Lee. I'm writing this down because I'm not sure how long I'll be able to keep the details straight in my mind. I had been driving down the interstate. I can recall that much, at least. But for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what interstate or where I had been intending to go. I only know that I saw one of those green signs for an exit ramp with an arrow. The sign simply said, Coleridge. Up ahead, I remember seeing a glimpse of a massive complex in unadorned gray stone or concrete through a gap in the trees on the left side of the road. I remember feeling a spark of recognition for this gray structure, and though I had never heard of the town before, somehow I was suddenly convinced I had reached my destination and signaled to exit. As I say, I cannot remember where I thought I was going or why, but the sight of the sign and the gray building convinced me that this was where I should depart the highway. What happened next is also difficult to explain. I did not fall asleep, so far as I know. I don't recall feeling particularly tired, nor was I lulled to slumber in the dark embrace of the night, for it was only late afternoon. It was much more like having your attention absolutely diverted. I cannot honestly tell you how long my mind was elsewhere, only that I became aware that I wasn't paying attention to the road, and that, with a Herculean effort, I pulled my awareness back from wherever it had gone. It is at this point that my memories, as I have them now, begin. The time before that seems completely erased, as though my consciousness was discontinuous prior to that point. The moments just before, of the highway, are the closest to seeming real, though even these are analogous to having smelled a warm apple pie rather than having actually tasted it. The first thing I noticed was that the car was not on the asphalt. I had apparently drifted to the right of the exit ramp and was driving on lush green grass. The reason this detail stayed with me, I think, was the sound, or rather its lack, for there was none, save perhaps a soft swishing noise. Though I cannot provide evidence to support this claim, I feel as though I was once a person well acquainted with cities and highways, jungles of asphalt, and the debris which washes like a tide through their dark crevices. And such surfaces are hard and unwelcoming. The sparse vegetation, which usually manages to eke out a strangled subsistence along the roadside, tend more to the excessively coarse, thorny, and stubbornly crunchy variety, and one would expect a cacophony of gnashing, scraping sounds to be created by driving an automobile through such a hedge, not to mention the more substantive resistance one would anticipate from the usual steel and concrete barriers which threaten every passing motorist. But this was only hushed whispers. I nudged the car back onto the ramp, for I was still on a ramp, though I immediately noticed it was different than any ramp I had ever seen attached to a highway. It was composed of strips of stone, which spanned the width of the roadway, interlaced with bars of well-maintained turf. One would expect any grass in such a ramp to be hammered to death, or rank with weeds, but it was not so. The sensation of driving over this surface was not unlike a muffled variant of rumble strips I recall from some disembodied memory, a rhythmic thrumming which is designed to startle a slumbering driver to momentary alertness as they veer from the roadway. Only this was pleasant, soothing. I reached the end of the ramp, and my confusion deepened. There was no signage. The ramp simply ended, and a narrow road, paved with small pea-stone gravel, led onward. There was no sight of the overpass I thought I remembered, nor the great gray edifice on the other side. There was no place for turning, only the path which led on, so I followed it. The road took me deeper into a wooded countryside. On either side I saw glimpses of small houses through the elder oaks and chestnuts which groped out into the air above the road. At last, perhaps a half-mile from the end of the ramp, the road promptly ended in a circular clearing. Ahead of me, a narrow footpath led on, up a gentle slope, toward the largest house I had ever seen. The manor itself defies description. It must suffice for me to say that it seemed to be of humble yet sound construction, without ostentation, and in a hue of luminous pale gold with white trim. The trim is important to mention because there seemed to be innumerable gables, each with its own window. The whole thing seemed warm and welcoming in a way which words utterly fail to convey. Yet, among the words which try are community, home, hearth, belonging, family, and security. Presently, a young woman was walking down the footpath towards the clearing, and suddenly I was seized with a panic. Somehow I had gotten off the roadway while I was distracted and was now trespassing on private property. An urgency to make plain my lack of intent in the matter filled my heart, and the confines of my car seemed suddenly cramped and claustrophobia-inducing. I leaped out of the vehicle and put my hands in the air. "I'm so sorry," I called out to the lady. "I'm not sure where I am or how I got here. I was on the highway, and I seem to have gotten confused." The woman stopped. She was carrying a small wicker basket with a white cloth covering its contents. She was tall and graceful, with long silver hair, yet her countenance was that of a young woman, without a trace of the lines of care which so quickly populate such faces in the world of men. She smiled. "Where were you trying to go?" she asked, not unkindly. I don't know," I stammered. "I'm sure this sounds strange, but I don't remember." She continued to smile. "It's not that strange. Human minds are easily confused by the simplest of things. A little deficit of sleep or food or water, and they become entirely unreliable," she said, as she pulled back the cloth from the basket. The semi-sweet aroma of freshly baked bread smote me like a hammer as she asked, "Are you hungry?" My mouth seemed to be filling with saliva, forcing me to swallow before I could answer her. "Yes, ma'am. I can't remember the last time I ate," I told her solemnly, and it was true. "Well then, let this be the first time. We always remember the first as the sweetest anyway, don't we?" she said with a shy smile, as she reached where I stood and proffered the basket. I seized one of the rolls from the basket and bit into it. It was delicious, and to this day I do remember it as the most delicious thing I have ever eaten. "Welcome to Coleridge. My name is Susan," she stated with a curtsy. I gulped the mouthful of bread and tried to respond. "My name is—" I began, before realizing I could not remember my own name. "It's all right," Susan soothed, as she touched my shoulder, and her touch was warm light, like the sunbeam which somehow finds you through the curtains in your sick room, bringing restoration in its suffusing glow. "You'll remember later, if you want to. Until then, I need to call you something. How about Joshua?" "Joshua," I replied, as if in a dream. Though I could offer no explanation or reason why, tears rolled down my cheeks, as a sense of relief and acceptance washed over me. "Yes, I would like that very much." "Good," she said confidently, still smiling. "Now, let's get you settled. The day is getting old, and I don't want you to miss supper," she said, holding out one hand to me. "Is it okay?" I asked. I looked back at the car, which looked dark and dusty. Indeed, a feeling of dread chilled my heart at the thought of climbing back into it. "Can I stay the night here?" She laughed, and the sound was like bird song. "Of course. You can stay here for one night or as long as you like. We have a place prepared for you." "What about my car?" I asked. Just mentioning it made me feel dirty, but I felt it impolite to impose on her by leaving my vehicle at the head of her driveway. "Leave it. It can stay there forever for all we care. You won't need it here." she assured me, and she clasped my hand in hers. She spoke the truth. I have never needed it again. I have had many suppers, many breakfasts, many light lunches under the shade of the great oak which stands by the water pump. I have joined bonfire celebrations of the harvest after a season of hard work beneath the hot summer sun, and I have watched many spring thaws wash away the frozen memory of winter's icy embrace. And never once, in all that time, have I needed my old car. For all I know, it sits there still. Once, I did indeed remember what my name used to be. It came to me suddenly, and my immediate reaction was to reject it instantly. I much preferred the man I have become. I much prefer to be Joshua, living in Coleridge, and savoring the warm smile of Susan, over the man I once was. So I cast the thought aside, and could not retrieve it now, even if I wanted to. I have lived so many years here in bliss, years beyond count, it seems, and though my memories of the place which came before this are gone, it may be that someday some other might find their way from there to here. If so, let these words be a testimony to my gratitude for the kindness which has been shown to me. I only know that I did nothing to deserve the bounty I have found. I toil each day, but this seems not a burden to me. It is joy to work and to accomplish, to achieve, to be fruitful. If, somehow, you find yourself in my predicament, stranded with your old world somewhere in the mist behind you, and this new uncharted expanse before you, I beseech you to trust and embrace the opportunity for a new life. Joshua. Editor's note. The preceding text was recovered from the body of inmate CP039225. The personnel transport, which was bringing overflow prisoners from various correctional facilities to the newly constructed Coleridge prison, rolled over on the exit ramp as it left the highway. The vehicle's monitoring software indicates the driver was operating the vehicle in excess of the speed limit. The transport landed on its side in the pond on the north side of the highway, where it quickly sank. The driver was able to extricate himself from the vehicle. However, all of the inmates, being chained into their seats, drowned in the accident. Unlike the other passengers, who all died universally frozen in positions of struggle and panic as they tried to free themselves from their bonds, inmate number CP039225 was found still seated, with eyes closed and hands folded in his lap. Curiously, the text was contained in a watertight plastic bag in his pocket, indicating that the contents must have been written and sealed inside before the transport struck the pond. It is noteworthy that review of the closed-circuit footage of inmate number CP039225 revealed nothing during the 2 weeks prior to the accident which indicated that he had done any writing. It is possible, of course, that the document was penned prior to that, as correctional system policy dictates a 2-week retention policy for these recordings, beyond which the recording medium is recycled. Public interest in the case, after the revelation of this document, compelled the administration to submit the document, along with other known handwriting samples of the presumed author, for comparative analysis. Findings were stated to be inconclusive. Public interest also resulted in a national query for additional evidence in the case, which had resulted in the incarceration of inmate number CP039225. Perhaps inspired by the redemptive tone of the piece, the query sought as its object a posthumous exoneration of the inmate. Efforts toward this object were said to be spearheaded by one Ruby Archibald of Round Rock, Texas. However, no additional evidence has to date been brought forward which has been efficacious in this regard.